My son drained my bank account and took his wife and her mother to Paris. I just smiled to myself, because 3 days later he called me sobbing, "Mom, what did you do?" My retribution was just getting started. If you want to hear how this all played out, make sure you follow my channel because I tell a new story for you every single day. The day I felt my world collapse was the very day my son stole every last cent without so much as a goodbye. I, Margaret Marge Peterson, was frozen solid. I sat there in my old worn floral armchair, the one I bought with my first good paycheck from the diner right after David turned 7. In front of me, my little smartphone screen glowed with a message that turned my blood to ice. Current balance, $0. I read it over and over, my hands shaking, not from my 69 years, but from that deep, sick feeling you get when your mind understands a truth your heart just can't accept. I called the bank. First a machine, then a young woman who asked too many questions. She told me the transfers were made online, big wire transfers, adding up to nearly $75,000. It was my whole life, my savings, my peace of mind, my only safety net. "And where did it all go?" I asked, my voice a whisper, as if I already knew the awful answer. "It was all sent to an account under the name of David Michael Peterson," the woman said without a hint of sympathy. "Ma'am, would you like me to file a fraud claim?" I didn't answer. I just hung up the phone. The house was so quiet. All I could hear was the hum of the old refrigerator and a car horn honking down the street. Then my landline rang, the old rotary phone I kept for emergencies. "Hello?" I said, my voice empty. "Marge, honey, did you see David's Facebook?" It was my neighbor Susan, her voice buzzing with excitement. "He's in Paris, dear. Eating at some fancy restaurant with his wife and her mother. Oh, they're living the high life. Look like they're in a movie." I swallowed a lump in my throat that felt as big as a fist. I slowly went to my bedroom, found my old tablet, and pulled up my son's page. I wasn't much for social media, but I watched him from afar, like peeking into a life that wasn't mine anymore. And there he was, David, my only child. The boy I raised all by myself after his father ran off with a cocktail waitress. The same boy I gave everything to, even the little plot of land my parents left me up in Wisconsin so he could finish college. He was smiling, holding a wine glass with his arm around Chloe, his wife, and Patricia, the mother-in-law who always looked at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. The caption read, "Paris, the start of our real life. We've earned this." And in the comments, Chloe had written, "To those who know their worth. Thanks for everything, mother-in-law." With a little champagne bottle emoji. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, holding that tablet like it was a hot coal. Then, with no one to see, a small smile touched my lips. It was a strange smile, a smile that knew something it had been refusing to see for a very long time. Miles away, under the gray skies of Paris, David raised his glass. "See," Chloe said, sipping her wine, "it was smart to just take the money. She's old. She was never going to use it for anything but medical bills anyway." Patricia, her mother, let out a sharp little laugh. "Clueless old woman. She probably thinks Paris is a brand of perfume. She was just hoarding that cash." David didn't say anything. He just stared at the Eiffel Tower, his eyes shining. But a little worm of doubt was starting to squirm in his belly, and he pushed it down, just like he did when he was a boy and he was hungry. And I'd tell him, "Just a little longer, sweetie. Tomorrow will be better." That night, the walls of my little Chicago bungalow felt like they were closing in. Everything was in its place, but nothing was the same. On the mantelpiece were photos of David, a chubby baby, in his Little League uniform, the day he graduated from college. My whole life had been for him. When he was 18, I sold my own mother's wedding ring to pay for his application fees. When he was 22, I gave him that land my daddy left me. At 29, I helped pay for the wedding, even though Chloe treated me like a stranger. I cooked for him, I did his laundry, I cleaned his messes, and he just floated further and further away. "Mom, you don't get how things work now," he would say. "Chloe and I, we have big dreams. You'll always be my mom, but you can't be attached to my hip forever." Just a week before he stole from me, I tried to visit him at their new condo downtown. I brought a casserole dish with his favorite macaroni and cheese. I buzzed their apartment. No answer. I waited on a bench across the street for nearly 2 hours until the doorman came over. "Are you waiting for Mr. Peterson?" "Yes, I'm his mother." "Ah, well, he left instructions that you're not to be let up without an appointment." I just nodded. I walked all the way home. I didn't take the bus. I wanted to feel the cold wind on my face. I thought of every meal I skipped, every extra shift I picked up, every dollar I put away for him. That same evening, Susan came over with a coffee cake. "You're a strong woman, Marge. Don't let this boy break you. He's just young and foolish." I sighed, looking out the window. "Do you think they ever feel sorry, Susan?" "Oh, of course they do. Usually when it's too late." "Well," I said, "I just hope when he realizes he's got something left to realize with." "So what are you going to do?" she asked. I looked at her, and my eyes felt different, harder. "I'm going to do what he taught me. I'm going to smile." Susan looked confused. "Smile?" "I've done enough crying, Susan. Now I'm just going to smile. I've got nothing left to lose. And a woman with nothing left to lose is a woman to be reckoned with." Meanwhile, in a fancy Paris hotel, David was just getting out of the shower when he heard Chloe on the balcony, talking on her phone. "Yes, it's done. The old bat has no idea. The money is here. Tomorrow we move it to the account in Switzerland and then we ditch David. Yes, of course, he's a fool. He thinks this is about us." David froze, the water dripping onto the floor. He didn't make a sound. He just went back into the room and got into bed. He lay beside Chloe, who was pretending to be asleep, and closed his eyes. Something had shifted, and he had no idea the real storm was about to hit. Back in my little house in Chicago, I was making a cup of tea. The night was quiet. I took out my old recipe book, the one where I kept all my mother's secrets. I wrote in my shaky hand on a blank page, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning of my silence, and my silence is going to be louder than any scream." Then I went to bed, and for the first time in forever, I slept without a single tear. And as I slept, my son, in a hotel room in Paris, glanced at his phone. A new notification from his bank. "Account frozen pending investigation." "What?" he whispered, staring at the screen. The first crack had just appeared in his perfect new life, and he didn't know that his mother, from thousands of miles away, had already made her first move. Sometimes, hurt doesn't make a sound. Sometimes it just sits, and it watches, and it waits for the perfect time to act. And my time was just beginning. The sun was barely up over Chicago, but I was awake. My bones ached, like they did every morning. But I didn't feel old. I felt new. A quiet fire was burning inside me. It wasn't anger, not really. It was a kind of clarity I'd never had before. As I put the kettle on, I remembered being 15, scrubbing floors in the big houses up on the North Shore. A skinny girl with calloused hands who knew more about laundry starch than algebra. My own mother was always too tired to wait up for me. My father had left years before. I never cried about it. I just got up earlier the next day and worked harder. I was 18 when I got pregnant with David. His father was a boy from the neighborhood who promised me the moon. He lasted until he found out I was having a boy, then he vanished. I didn't cry then either. I just tightened the scarf on my head and found a second cleaning job. I raised David all on my own, sometimes with him sleeping in a carrier on my back while I washed some rich woman's china. When he started school, one of my employers, a kind woman, offered to pay his tuition at a good Catholic school if I would work for her full-time. I didn't even have to think about it. I took the job, lived in a tiny room in her attic, and took the train back to the city every weekend to be with my son. I always brought him something, even if it was just a candy bar. Years went by. David grew up. He was smart. "Mom," he told me when he was 16, "when I get rich, I'm going to buy you a big house with a garden." I just smiled and said, "You don't have to buy me a thing, honey. Just don't ever forget your old mom." Then he got into college. I sold the only thing of value my family ever had, a small piece of land by a lake in Wisconsin. I sold it for way less than it was worth because David needed the tuition money right away. "My son is going to be an architect," I'd tell anyone who would listen. "He's going to build beautiful things." And he did get out of our neighborhood, but not in the way I dreamed. In his second year of college, he met Chloe. She had a voice like honey and eyes like chips of ice. The first time I met her, my stomach clenched. She just looked like the kind of person who only knew how to take. Her mother, Patricia, was even worse. She wore fake designer bags and acted like she was royalty. The first time they came to my house for dinner, they looked around like they were afraid to touch anything. "How quaint," Patricia had said, looking at my mother's old wallpaper. Chloe whispered something to David in the kitchen, but I heard her plain as day. "I can't believe you grew up in this place. It's like a charity case." I smiled and served the roast chicken, but something inside me cracked. Slowly, Chloe started pulling him away. First, she said they were too busy for my Sunday dinners. Then she asked me not to give them advice. Then she said I didn't fit in with their new friends. David, so wrapped up in her, just went along with it. The last time he came to my house alone, I made him his favorite beef stew. "Mom, Chloe thinks you're a little too involved in our lives," he said, pushing the food around his plate. "I just want you to be happy, David," I told him, my heart sinking. "I don't need you to worry about me anymore," he said, as if that was a kindness. "I'm a grown man." I didn't cry. I just cleared his plate and sent him home with the leftovers. The next few months were one small cut after another. Chloe took over their finances. She convinced him they needed new bank accounts, ones I didn't know about. She told him I was from a different time, that I wouldn't understand their modern life, and he believed her. That's when I started to get suspicious. A letter from a credit card company I didn't recognize. A bank statement that never showed up. So I called Arthur. Arthur was my friend from childhood, a lawyer who was now retired and spent his days doing crossword puzzles. "Arthur, how would I know if someone was using my name for things?" "Are you in some kind of trouble, Marge?" "No," I said, "but I think my son might be." He had me bring over the few papers I had. For weeks he looked through things, until he called me over. "Marge, your son listed you as a co-signer on a loan. You never signed it, but your signature is on the paper." "But I can barely sign my own name." "They forged it, Marge. And they've been taking small amounts from your savings for months." I just sat there. The money wasn't the thing that hurt. It was the proof. My son wasn't just being foolish. He was a willing part of it. He was stealing from his own mother. A few days later, they left for Paris. David, who didn't have a steady job, used my money. "It's for the family," Chloe had told him. "Besides, she's not using it. You're her son. It's practically your money already." He hesitated, but he did it. From his fancy laptop in their new condo, he transferred everything. He did it fast, like ripping off a bandage. And then he was gone. The next day, I found out. And I didn't cry. I just wrote in my little book. My son didn't die, but the mother inside me did. And from that moment, I changed. I started making calls. I started visiting offices. While David was taking selfies in Paris, thinking he had won, I was back in Chicago, quietly setting the trap that would take back everything he had stolen from me. And Chloe, she was already planning her escape. But David didn't know that the woman he left behind wasn't the same one he'd see again. That woman was gone. In her place was a mother who had been hurt, but who was now wide awake. And when a mother like that wakes up, there's nothing she won't do. The betrayal stopped being a dull ache and became a sharp, cold fact. I had been invisible to him, a tool to be used and then discarded. But I wasn't going to just fade away. What a mother keeps silent can be the most powerful weapon of all. My silence was no longer about pain. It was about planning. When a mother realizes she's been replaced, she doesn't scream. She evolves. David was too busy living his new life to notice. A life where no one called him sweetie, but sir. A life that was shiny, clean, and completely empty. Chloe had woven her web around him perfectly. He was mesmerized by her, by the way she talked, the way she dressed, the way she acted like the whole world owed her something. But behind that perfect smile was a calculator. She wanted a name, an account, and a man to pay for it all. At first, her comments were small, disguised as jokes. "Honey, why does your mother have to have an opinion about everything?" Or, "I just don't want our future children to grow up with a scarcity mindset." David would just laugh uncomfortably. "That's just how she is. She's always been a worrier." "It's not worry," Chloe would say. "It's a way of controlling you. Women from her generation think they're saints for raising a child alone, but they don't see how they hold you back." Little by little, she decided when they could see me. It was always in a public place, never at my home, because she said it smelled of mothballs. Every time I asked David why he never came over, he'd just look at the floor. "We're just so busy, Mom." But I could see the truth in his eyes. He was ashamed. Patricia, Chloe's mother, was just as bad, but she used bigger words. "Margaret, dear, have you ever considered moving? This neighborhood isn't suitable for a woman of your age. With the money you have saved, you could afford something much nicer, don't you think?" She was fishing, trying to find out how much I had. That day, I knew. They didn't just want me out of the way. They wanted me gone. One day, during a lunch Chloe had organized, I decided to try one last time. I waited until Chloe was on her phone and Patricia was in the restroom. "David," I said, my voice steady, "are you really happy? Do you see the way she looks at you when you're not paying attention?" David looked down. Chloe glanced up from her phone. The air got cold. And then David just snapped. "That's it, Mom. You're just jealous. You can't stand that there's another woman in my life." I didn't say a word. I just put my fork down. In that silence, I knew he was truly gone. When I left that day, no one even walked me to the door. That evening, I sat on my bed and tried to remember the last time my son had told me he loved me without me saying it first. I couldn't remember. The next few weeks, things got worse. Chloe and Patricia were always at David's office, helping him with his business ideas, suggesting investments. Then Chloe asked for access to his bank accounts, to help organize their finances. "Don't you trust me?" she'd purred. And David, lost in her web, said yes. I knew something was wrong, so I asked my neighbor Susan for help. She'd been a bookkeeper for 30 years. "Susan, can you show me how to look at my bank account on this tablet?" For a few nights, she patiently taught me how to log in, how to read the statements. The first time I saw the transaction list, I felt dizzy. Large withdrawals, all on dates that David had visited or called asking for some document for insurance purposes. He had access, I told her. He said it was to help me with some paperwork. "Marge," she said gently, "this isn't paperwork. This is theft." My heart split in two, but I didn't cry. I got a notebook and wrote down every single transaction, every stolen dollar. Then Susan showed me something else. "Look here. This is a form to make your account a joint account, but that's not your signature, is it?" It was a clumsy forgery. They hadn't even tried to hide it. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I closed the tablet, took a deep breath, and said, "Nothing. Not yet." In Paris, David was starting to feel a chill. It wasn't just the weather. Chloe was different. She spent all her time on her phone, smiling at messages he couldn't see. One night, he heard her talking to her mother when they thought he was asleep. "It's almost done. Why do we have to keep pretending? As soon as we get the money moved, we leave him. What if he finds out? So what? He's a mama's boy. Who's going to stick up for him? That old woman?" David's blood ran cold. He didn't move a muscle. For the first time in years, he thought of me, really thought of me. He remembered how I used to sing to him when he was sick, how I told him that no one in the world would ever love him the way I did. He wanted to call me, but he didn't. Back in Chicago, my plan was moving forward. With Arthur's help, I went to the bank. I requested every statement, every signed document. Then we went to the courthouse. We discovered something even worse. David had tried to take out a mortgage against my house using forged papers. It failed because of a clerical error, but he had tried. That day, I went to the little church at the end of my block. I didn't go to pray. I just sat in a pew and looked at the stained glass windows. "God," I whispered, "just give me the strength not to hate him." When I got home, I put on an old blues record and started to knit. But I wasn't knitting a sweater. I was knitting a net, and it was almost ready. The seeds of betrayal had been sown, and the harvest was coming. I could feel it. I wasn't anxious. I was calm, like a hunter waiting for the perfect moment. One morning, I was cleaning under the armchair and found a folded piece of paper stuffed inside a plastic bag. I almost threw it out, but something told me to look. It was a document. A legal document. A last will and testament. It was a will, supposedly written by me, leaving everything I owned, the house, my savings, to David upon my death, and at the bottom was my forged signature. I didn't cry. I wasn't even surprised anymore. I just felt a deep, profound emptiness. I called Arthur. "Come over. I found the last piece of the puzzle." 2 hours later, he was sitting in my kitchen holding the paper. "This is bad, Marge. This is more than just theft. They were planning for you to be gone." "He wanted me dead on paper," I said, my voice flat. "And now?" Arthur asked. "What are you going to do?" I smiled, that same strange smile from before. "Now," I said, "I'm going to bury him while he's still alive." It was only a couple of days later that I got a call from my doctor's office. They wanted me to come in. I knew it wasn't good news. I walked there with my head held high. Dr. Adams sat me down. He had that look in his eye, the one doctors get when they have to break a person's life in two. "The tests came back, Margaret. It's not good." I just looked at him. "You have advanced lung cancer. It's spread. I'm so sorry, but we estimate you have 6 months, maybe less." I didn't say a thing. I just stared at a crack on the wall. 6 months. "We can start aggressive chemotherapy," he said gently, "but the chances are slim." "Will it make me sick?" "Yes, very." "Then no," I said. "I'm not going to spend my last days in a hospital gown." The doctor just stared at me. He'd never seen someone take a death sentence with such calm. I stood up, gathered my purse, and turned at the door. 6 months, I said. "For what I need to do, that's more than enough." I walked all the way home. I wanted to feel the city, to see the places where I had lived my life. I passed the market where I used to buy our groceries, the park where I taught David to ride a bike. When I got home, I pulled out a wooden box from under my bed. It was full of memories, old letters, and the only picture I had of David as a little boy, asleep with his head on my lap. I looked at it for a long, long time. Then I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on. "No more waiting," I whispered to myself. "The work begins now." The first thing I did was go with Arthur to file an official complaint. Not as a hurt mother, but as a victim of elder financial abuse. We reported the forgery, the attempted fraud with the house, and the theft of my savings. We attached all the proof. Then we filed a motion to have the joint account frozen immediately. It wasn't easy, but Arthur knew the law. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked. "I was born ready, Arthur. I just didn't know it until now." After that, I bought a new red notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "To my son, David, I gave you my life with love. You took my dignity without a thought. This is not revenge. This is a lesson, and it is the only thing I have left to give you before I die in peace." Meanwhile, in Paris, the fantasy was falling apart. Tanya barely spoke to him. Patricia looked right through him. Jackson felt a constant humming dread. One night, he found a hidden folder in their shared cloud storage. It was a backup of Chloe's text messages with another man. "Chloe, we have the money. The idiot has no clue. As soon as you get back, we're gone." "What if he finds out?" the man wrote. "Who cares? Let him rot. I'm not spending my life with someone who reeks of his poor, pathetic mother." David felt the floor drop out from under him. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, he thought of my voice, my hands, my love. He wanted to call me, but shame kept his fingers from dialing. I wasn't waiting for his call. I was working. I made calls. I signed papers. With Arthur's help, we activated an international banking clause for suspicious activity. The system was slow, but it worked. An alert was flagged on David's name for his return to the United States. They wouldn't arrest him at the airport, but they would be waiting for him. In my red notebook, I wrote, "Justice is not loud. It is quiet. It is patient. I will watch him lose everything, and I will not say a word." The second betrayal, from Chloe, didn't break him. It woke him up. But it was too late. The mother in me was gone. But the woman was finally free. It was only a matter of days until he came home, and he had no idea what kind of wreckage was waiting for him. David always thought hell would be a place of fire and screams. He never imagined it could be the cold indifference of a Parisian waiter when his credit card was declined. It started with one refusee, then another. Within 2 days, he was completely broke. No cash, no credit, and 2 women who looked at him like he was garbage. Chloe screamed at him right on the street. "You useless fool! What did you do with the money? I told you your mother was bad luck. Now look at us." David couldn't even form words. He just knew the accounts were frozen, that his name was attached to some kind of international fraud investigation, and that he had to go to the American embassy. That night, Patricia packed her bags. "I told you he was no good, Chloe. This is what you get for marrying down." Then Chloe left too. Not a word. Not a look back. David was left alone in a hotel room he couldn't pay for. Back in Chicago, I was finishing my work. Arthur had used his old connections to contact someone at the Treasury Department. He explained the situation, the elder abuse, the forged documents. An official alert for illicit capital transfer was activated. It meant that when David stepped on U.S. soil, he would be immediately detained for questioning. It wasn't about hate. It was about consequences. In my red notebook, I wrote, "A mother's love sometimes has to be tough, because what you allow is what will continue. I did not raise a thief, but he became one. And if I am the one who has to stop him, then so be it." Susan sat with me through most of it. "Doesn't it hurt, Marge?" she'd ask. "Of course it hurts. It hurts like tearing my own heart out. But some hurts are necessary to heal." The meeting at the embassy was humiliating for David. They put him in a small, sterile room and explained that there was an active complaint against him in the United States. They told him the funds were frozen, and he would have to answer for them upon his return. He walked out of there a broken man. He thought of me. He knew. He just knew. This was my doing. And like a lost little boy, he called my number. "Mom," he sobbed, the moment I answered. I was in my kitchen, shelling peas. I recognized his voice instantly. My hand shook, but my voice was steady. "Mom, what did you do?" "They took everything. I'm all alone. Chloe and her mother left me. I took a deep breath. I didn't take anything from you, David. I just stopped you from taking anything more from me. But they're going to arrest me. You promised you would always be there for me. I was, I said calmly, until you stopped being there for yourself. Please, Mom, help me. I don't know what to do. Learn, I said. And I hung up the phone. No tears, no lectures, nothing. It was the first time in my life I let my son face his own pain, because I finally understood that sometimes pain is a better teacher than love. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote him a letter, a final testament. I put it on the last page of the red notebook. It was for him, for when he finally came home. My dearest David, it began. You were my sun, my moon, and all my stars. I gave you everything I had and everything I didn't. I do not regret the sacrifices. I regret that you forgot their value. You chose ghosts in fancy clothes over the woman who gave you life. I don't hate you. I could never hate you. But I am no longer the mother who will clean up your messes. I am the mother who will teach you, even if the lesson breaks both our hearts. If you ever find true remorse, this letter will be waiting. Not to save you, but so you can never say that you were not warned. At the bottom, I drew a tiny, imperfect heart. It was all the softness I had left. David wandered the streets of Paris like a ghost. He stayed in cheap hostels. He barely ate. His return flight was a journey into the abyss. He knew they were waiting. Ellie had already returned. She traveled alone. She didn't need anyone. She settled back into her little house, with the familiar creak of the floorboards and the scent of old memories. Life was quiet. Arthur brought her medications. Susan brought her soup. The neighborhood looked out for her. She was their legend, the quiet woman who had stood up for herself. She didn't talk much about it. She listened to her blues music and sometimes watched the children play in the street. Her peace had returned, but her body was failing. The cancer was a slow, steady thief. She grew thinner, weaker, but her spirit never bent. One morning, David appeared at the end of the street. He looked thin and haunted. He just stood there, on the opposite sidewalk, and watched. He saw me sitting in my rocking chair on the porch. He saw a little neighborhood girl bring me a dandelion, and he saw me hug her. He didn't cross the street. He just left a small paper bag on the steps of the porch and walked away. Inside were 2 donuts, the kind I used to buy him after school. I felt him there, but I didn't acknowledge him. Not yet. He came back every few days, always leaving something small. A flower. A newspaper. He never knocked. He knew he had no right to. He was serving his penance. One night I knew my time was short. I took out my red notebook and wrote one last entry. My son, love is not a debt to be paid, but a gift to be honored. If you have finally learned that, then you are not lost. When I am gone, do not look for me in a grave. Find me in every mistake you choose not to repeat. Find me in every kindness you show to a stranger. If you truly want to forgive yourself, start by being better to others. That will be my legacy. I signed my full name, Margaret Ann Peterson. I folded it, put it in an envelope, and wrote "For David" on the front. The morning I passed away was sunny. The light streamed in through my clean windows. The neighbors found me in my chair, the red notebook on my lap. My face was peaceful. There was no struggle, just the quiet end to a long, hard-fought storm. Arthur was the first one there. He gently closed my eyes. He knew I wouldn't have wanted tears. Brenda and the other neighbors organized a simple service. No fancy flowers, just bouquets of wildflowers from their gardens and the children's crayon drawings. David wasn't called, but he knew. He felt it in the air. He walked up to the house and saw the open door. No one stopped him. He walked over to my body, knelt, and touched my cold hand. He saw the envelope with his name on it. He opened it and read it, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. In a corner, he saw the old wooden box was open. Inside was the photo of him as a child, asleep on my lap. On the back, in my handwriting, it said, "I still believe in the good in you, David." He clutched the photo to his chest. He went outside and sat in my rocking chair. He looked at the sky and understood. He had lost his mother, but he had a chance to find himself again. Days turned into weeks. The neighbors said the man from the stories stayed in the old house. He had no new furniture, no visitors, just an old rocking chair, a red notebook, and a single photo on the mantelpiece. Those who leave us make room, and those who stay behind have a choice: to fill that room with regret or to fill it with redemption. Did you enjoy our story today? I tell a new one every day, so be sure to follow and click that notification bell so you don't miss tomorrow's. And if you're looking for another story that will leave you speechless, just click on one of the videos you see on the screen now. I'll see you tomorrow.